Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. Now we come to the second episode of Fawlty Towers Season 1, The Builders. Before I get into the heart of the video, if I sound a little annoyed and disheartened during the recording of this, it's because this is the second time I've had to record this one. I had it all recorded, ready to put on the computer, and I accidentally deleted it. Gotta make sure to double check before I put the delete one. But I was running out of space on the camera, and I'm like, oh crap, gotta delete it once I get these over. And I didn't realize till afterwards that I hadn't put it on. But, you know, live and learn. The plot of this episode centers around Basil and Sybil being away from the hotel for the most part. They're going away on a weekend excursion, the first time they've been away from the hotel in a while. As Sybil says, since one of their friends had their hysterectomy, which, throwaway line, but it is kind of funny in a dark way, which definitely fits John Cleese's dark style of humor. They go away, leaving Polly in charge of the hotel with Manuel, because there's only two older female guests and the major that are there, so it's not like they need someone else to be watching there, because what could go wrong? Famous last words. What goes wrong is that O'Reilly, the man who was mentioned in passing in the previous episode, who Basil likes to hire because he's cheap, but Sybil hates him because he does shoddy work, he has been hired to do some indoor renovation work. And what happens when he shows up? Polly is taking a nap because she didn't sleep well the night before, and Manuel is manning the front desk. And due to a little misunderstanding and ineptitude on the part of the builders, they fixed the wrong wall. And when Basil stops by to see how everything's going, he is horrified. And from this, we get an epic John Cleese reaction. And even though it is kind of fixed by the end of the episode, it is still shoddy, which leads to one of my favorite little ending shots and a good chuckle moment. If there's anything about this episode that kind of stands out from the rest, writing and acting aside, is that from the audience, there isn't much enthusiasm. I mean, they do laugh. It's not like the audience is just crickets like a bad professional wrestling town, like, as Salamanca calls it, Corpus Christi. But you could definitely tell, compared to the next episode and the previous episode, that the same energy level isn't there. And this is part of the reason why John Cleese, on the DVD at least, considers this to be the least good episode. Not because of the writing, but because of the audience reaction and how it impacted their performance. Because with a sitcom, you can do straight normal acting with it, but when you're acting directly in front of the audience, more so if you do ad-libs for different takes, you're going to base how you're performing based on the energy you're feeling from the audience. It's kind of like a stage performance in that way, and depending on how they react is going to affect your timing. And if your timing's off, the joke might not work. Well, according to John, part of the reason he feels this is the case is that there were people from some Icelandic organization in the audience that day, and either due to a language barrier or them not getting the British humor, they didn't laugh as much. And that impacted the episode. And you can kind of tell, I mean, I still find the episode hilarious, but that's someone watching it versus someone watching it in the audience at the time who might not get the humor. And I do get British humor pretty well. So the humor and everything isn't lost on me, but it is noticeable when you go back and watch it. And I don't know if I put this as the least good one, but when you're watching it, it does take you out just a little bit. While I don't usually mention the director when I'm doing these episode-by-episode reviews, for the first season of Fawlty Towers, I think it's apt to mention that John Howard Davies is the director of all 6 episodes here. Which, the reason I mention that is because it allows for this first season to have an aesthetic continuity. Because with writing, you got Connie and John doing the writing, so from a characterization, joke, and timing standpoint, there's going to be that continuity. And then having this guy direct it, you got that aesthetic continuity. All the shots that are on a set all feel similar. And when they go outside for a, on location shot, it's going to have the same aesthetic all the way through, even though when you compare it to the set, the aesthetic's going to be different. You can tell, okay, they're outside, that's a set. But with the same director, there's not going to be any discontinuity, like you watch an outside scene from one episode, then the next time they do an outside scene, it feels different because of a different director and how they approach scenes different. So it all feels like it's the same world. You're not like, okay, that looks good, but that one, it feels like it's a totally different world. kind of like when you go from Batman Returns to Batman Forever. It's supposed to be the same universe, but it has that different feel, so you're like, is this the same Gotham? The acting in the episode is pretty spot on, but that goes without saying throughout this entire show. Andrew Sachs as Manuel, you can definitely tell he's having fun. They're still playing up the whole language barrier thing, which is the main running gag with him, and him and Basil being at odds because of it, mostly because Basil thinks he's speaking Spanish, but you can obviously tell he's speaking gibberish. Manuel not understanding, but trying to do his best, which is why I like the Manuel character, because he means well, even though he can't really understand English a lot, but you could tell he's not malicious. And here, Andrew Sachs is having fun with it, like when he's by himself, acting like the boss. He picks up the phone, Manuel Towers, how are you? Stuff like that. And you get some nice little, nice jokes when it comes to the language barrier in this episode. Like, when the gnome is dropped off. The guy's asking where the boss is, and he says the Generalissimo. And Manuel thinks he's talking about Franco, and he's like, in Madrid! Although a later dub edited that to have him say dead. And then he thinks that this gentleman wants to put the gnome in a hotel room, which is kind of funny. But then it takes a slightly sad turn once the builders show up, and the reason I say that is because Basil, he's known for doing some physical comedy with Manuel. Usually slap him, or earlier they'll pick him up to take him to the window to tell him to clean it. But in this one, he gets the builders to punch him. And that's in a moment where I'm going to address the whole thing with the wrong wall. We don't see the hit, but it's implied enough. And how does Basil get him to get hit? He tells Manuel to call the builder a hideous orangutan. And Connie Booth is pretty good. Of the 2 episodes so far, I think I like her acting better in this one, and that's because we actually get to see her do some artwork. And the funny thing about that is Basil cannot tell that what she's drawing is him. Manuel could tell right away, but Basil can't. So I'm guessing that Basil could tell art is art, but he can't really recognize what it is. And the thing is, later on, when Basil gets annoyed in the latter part of the episode, you see Connie, as Polly pick up the artwork and like sketching real quick. She's like, "Oh, I gotta get this down," and then he looks over like, "What are you doing?" Nice little moment there. I know in the second season they scrap her being an art major, but the way that Connie sells it in this episode, it's like, I don't know why they got rid of that. It worked. Maybe she felt more comfortable with what they have her be in the second season than in this one, but she sold it pretty well here, I thought. Now we come to John Cleese and his overreaction in this episode, which his overreactions as Basil Fawlty is what makes the show. I mean, there's other funny things about the show, but his overreactions, they are legendary as Basil. And I know John considers himself, I should say, he's still with us, a writer first and an actor second, but he is still a pretty good actor. And in this show, and in this episode, you really see it. When he comes back and finds what happened to the hotel, his overreaction, and everyone talks about the moment where he's confronting Polly about it, and then she's saying, "It's your fault, you're the one that hired O'Reilly and they're the ones that did this." And he's like, "Oh, then I must be punished. You're a naughty boy, Basil. Don't do it again, Basil." It's just the way he's melting down. It's not my favorite of his meltdowns. That's going to be in a couple episodes, but that meltdown, John just sells it well. It always seems his overreactions and his overbearing characters are his best, whether it's over the top, overbearing, or subtle overbearing, like how he was as Robin Hood in Time Bandits. Although that's also slightly snobbish, which he does pretty well, which is Basil's other good character trait. But if you know anything about Donald Sinclair, like I talked about in the first episode review, you can see why he put that in there. And this episode, he also does some good little cowering and lying when Sybil finds out about it. And him cowering and trying to lie about it, and Sybil's reaction. Prunella, she does a great job reacting to it, especially when she finds out the whole thing. But just seeing Basil trying to lie around and saying, "Oh, Stubbs did all this work, I'm calling O'Reilly to fix it," and then him trying to come up with another lie and another lie to go on top of himself, and you're like, Basil. You can see why in the comedy thing that John said that he just loves with how quickly Basil comes up with excuses, even if they are poor one. That's shown here. It's not my favorite example of that. That's going to be the example he actually showed in that comedy thing, but it's a good example of that. And it always comes back to bite him in the ass. Like I said, that's a summation of his schemes in this show. Other than the slightly poor audience reaction, if there's anything that certain viewers might be turned off with this episode, it's that the Irish characters, including O'Reilly, are stock. Like I said, I know Manuel is a little stock, but his is at least making fun of the fact that, Basil's so cheap that he hires someone that can't really even speak the English pretty well, and he is a well-meaning character, so he does have some more redeeming qualities. With O'Reilly and his cronies, they are essentially stereotypical Irishmen. I mean, his men have that slight temper. I mean, that's the reason Manuel gets punched. They don't really speak with thick accents, but they're there. And of course, that goes with one of my favorite gags from them, where Manuel's trying to ask if they're O'Reilly's men, but because of his accent, he's saying O'Reilly. So one of them gets really upset right away, like, "Are you calling me something in Spanish?" And then once another one realizes he's trying to say O'Reilly, they calm down a bit until the orangutan line. And then, of course, O'Reilly, he speaks with that thick Irish accent where you're like, "Oh, he is definitely Irish, yeah." Talking about Catholicism, the good Lord, and of course, drinking a pint of Guinness while on the work, so going with the whole drunken Irish stereotype. Even though from what I understand, I guess there is a little bit of truth in there, but if you don't really like the use of stock stuff like that, it might turn you off. But I think the acting is on point. Like with Manuel, it goes hand in hand with Basil being so cheap that he goes with O'Reilly and his men, even though he knows they are not the best. And we see that. You work drunk, you're going to do shoddy work. And of course, David Kelly plays O'Reilly very well to the point where you're like, yeah. And David Kelly, when I watched this episode the first time, I'm like, this guy looks familiar, but I can't put my finger on it. Then I looked it up before I recorded this. I'm like, oh, it's the actor that played Grandpa Joe in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Although his voice doesn't sound the same, age accounting. He has an accent here, and he doesn't really have much of an accent in Charlie, so I'm wondering if he put the Irish accent on for this one, or if he speaks without his accent when he did Charlie. Either way, he does a pretty good job, and he definitely comes across as someone who's had a couple beers, especially when he's getting down to work, which ties into the ending gag, where even his best work is still substandard. But as Sybil tells Basil several times throughout the episode, you get what you pay for, and that sums up Basil hiring O'Reilly. If the whole stock aspect of his character isn't your cup of tea, you might not like that aspect of the episode, but they're kind of the driving force of the plot, so you might not like this episode as a whole. But I did enjoy it. I got some laughs out of it. I don't know if I put it in my favorite episode list the entire series, but it is a pretty spot-on second episode. That concludes my review of Fawlty Towers Episode 2, The Builders. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to share, like, and subscribe for future content. And next time, we're really going to get into overbearing Basil to the point where he just will not mind his own business when it comes to what the guests do in their own room, as long as it's not illegal. Till next time, guys.